This is even better than we thought. Sean Manaea, who has now re-entered the Mets rotation, has completely transformed and sparked the team's pitching staff, and now a path looks likely for the left-handed southpaw Samoan to finally regain the success he had when he became a fan favorite in 2024. What's going on, guys? I'm Josh Byrne. You're tuned into Mets Digest. Guys, please look into subscribing if you are not already. 67% of viewers are not subscribed, and it makes the world of a difference. And shout out all of you who are currently subscribed, as me, Michael Duda, and everyone at Mets Digest works on providing daily Mets updates. So, yesterday, the Metropolitans were victorious over the Philadelphia Phillies by a score of 6-4, and a big reason why was Sean Manaea for the second consecutive turn through the rotation, coming back as a starter and providing a more than adequate performance. And look, Sean Manaea's numbers on the season, they're not exactly anything to write home about. He has an ERA over 4.5. It's not anything great, but when you look at what he's done in his past 7 games, it's been a different story. An ERA just over 3 in 7 appearances, including 2 starts, one yesterday against the Phillies, and then the one before that last week against the Atlanta Braves. And look, Sean Manaea, the numbers aren't incredibly flashy, but going up against a team that you're trying to overtake in the wild card race and chase, on the road, 5 1/3 innings, 3 runs, only 2 earned, only 1 walk and 5 strikeouts is certainly everything the Metropolitans could have asked for. And shout out Justin Crawford. He's a promising young player on the Phillies, but he had maybe the most hideous looking strikeout I have seen this season, and that was induced by none other than Sean Manaea. And Sean Manaea is not the same pitcher he was at the beginning of the season. He's just not. He's certainly changed things up, and the number one difference for him has been that fastball velocity. A lot has been made of Sean Manaea's arm angle because when he first came over to the Mets after signing via free agency in the offseason heading into 2024, he was basically a guy who would bounce back and forth between the bullpen and the starting rotation because he never found any consistency. And he found a lot of consistency in the second half of 24 because he mimicked his arm angle to the likes of Chris Sale, one of the most successful and dominant left-handed pitchers in the major leagues. And he sort of got away from that, Sean Manaea did, in the past year plus, where he sort of fell out of that success rate that he was having at the end of 2024. He reworked on his mechanics, he put in extra time behind the scenes, and now you're seeing the results come with it. And also of note is that Sean Manaea's fastball, which was at a career low mark and is still ranked very low on Baseball Savant because it takes into account a season average, has now ticked up to around a 92 to 93 mile per hour fastball average. He's not going to fool you for the likes of, one of the top flamethrowers in the game by any means, but the difference between averaging out about 89 or 90 on your four-seamer versus averaging 92 and 93 is everything. Because frankly, even though velocity isn't the end-all be-all for success at a major league level, there comes a point where it is very, very difficult to have any sort of sustainable success without being impeccably perfect if you're not throwing at least 92 and 93 and at least keeping batters off balance when you pick up the velocity. And certainly those couple miles per hour that he's added to his fastball that match what he was hitting on his fastball back when he was having the most success of his career has been a huge key to his success, and the Mets need it. We know that the Mets have a lot of injuries right now. Clay Holmes is down. Christian Scott recently went down. David Peterson, they haven't been able to count on him. Jonah Tong, they had to, demote back to AAA because they felt that was best for his development, even though I have issues with that. But nonetheless, the fact of the matter is the Mets need consistency in the rotation if they're going to have any consistency as a team. The bullpen's been fantastic. The best part of the team this year, probably, hands down. But the starting rotation has certainly been a weak spot, especially in recent weeks. And Sean Manaea hadn't made a start all season because the Mets had such little confidence in him up until recently. And that decision of reinserting him into the Mets rotation has certainly paid dividends, and they need him. Because keep in mind, Sean Manaea is the highest paid pitcher on the New York Metropolitans. It's not Kodai Senga, it's not Freddie Peralta, it's Sean Manaea. Because in 2024, Sean Manaea had a great season. He finished the second half with an ERA under 3 just in those second half starts, and he parlayed that into a 3-year, $75 million contract, and it easily makes him the highest annual value paid pitcher on the Mets. And unfortunately, that contract started last year. He dealt with injuries last year. He dealt with inconsistencies. Things didn't really go his way. Came into this year, as mentioned, not even listed in the starting rotation. But due to inconsistency from David Peterson and Mendoza, Carlos Mendoza, Mets manager, trying to shake things up and find any success possible, they reinserted him back into the rotation, and it's been quite a pleasant surprise here, better than we could have expected. Anthony DiComo had this to say after the game yesterday on Manaea's performance. Quote, "It wasn't as good as last time, but Manaea's velocity ran above 93 miles per hour again, and he kept the Mets in the game, and he certainly did." And, again, you look at what Manaea did in the start before, and that was against the Braves, and it was even better. 6 innings, 2 runs, 6 strikeouts. The Mets wound up losing that game, but really because they could only score 1 run. But yesterday, look, the numbers, again, as DiComo mentioned, not quite as good, but Manaea did not get the best of luck. He started off rocky. He hit Trey Turner to lead off the game, and he allowed an RBI single to Alec Bohm. Alec Bohm really had Sean Manaea's number yesterday, but what Sean Manaea was able to do was he was able to work out of trouble, because in the second inning, he allowed a leadoff triple to one Edmundo Sosa, and he left him stranded. He worked through the bottom third of the Phillies order, and the Phillies don't have a great offense this season, and they've really been winning a lot based on their pitching, but nonetheless, it's extremely impressive to be able to leave guys stranded at third when they hit a leadoff triple in any context, especially when you're playing in a bandbox stadium in Citizens Bank Park on the road. And he also allowed a run in the third inning off another RBI from Alec Bohm, but he was really betrayed in that inning. Francisco Alvarez, guys, we all know about his talents offensively. Francisco Alvarez in yesterday's game showed why he ranks as one of the worst defenders behind the backstop for the Mets, because he allowed a passed ball on what should have been a strikeout, which was a strikeout but didn't result in an out because of a passed ball to Kyle Schwarber, and he wound up scoring on the Alec Bohm double. So essentially, Sean Manaea had to get 4 outs in that inning instead of 3. And look, he got into a rhythm in the 5th and 6th innings, and Sean Manaea was asked about his performance after the game, a game in which he pitched into the 6th inning through 95 pitches, 63 strikes, and looked kind of better as the game went on, and he had this to say. This is what Sean Manaea said. He said he felt, and this is courtesy of SNY TV, that he, quote, could give a couple more last night, but, quote, respected, end quote, Carlos Mendoza's decision to pull him after 5 1/3 innings. I didn't hate Mendoza's decision to pull Sean Manaea when he did. I think that Manaea is a guy that is still relatively new to the rotation this season. We know he has extensive experience in the past, and he can certainly eclipse 100 pitches, but I think you want to be a little bit delicate with how fast you're ramping up his work. But certainly, guys, I mean, these are 2 big games that he pitched in against the Braves and against the Phillies, and he certainly proved that he can, at the very least, keep the Mets in the game, but actually probably do more than that. Now, look, do I believe that Sean Manaea's automatically back to who he was in the second half of 2024 when he was one of the best pitchers in the National League, the guy that went out in Game 4 of the National League Division Series against these Phillies and absolutely shoved, gave the Mets 6 great innings that night? No, not necessarily, but if he can be 70, 80% of that guy, that is huge for a Mets team that basically had their own management somewhat right off Sean Manaea, which is why they relegated him to the bullpen for the first portion of this season. And now all of a sudden, his fastball has more life on it than we've seen in the past almost year now. His stuff looks good. His arm angle seems to be at the same slot it was back in 2024 when he was having a lot of success. And is the contract now justified? Look, we're a long way from deciding and litigating that decision. I was certainly in favor of the Sean Manaea extension when it happened because he was the Mets' best pitcher in 2024, and it just hasn't worked out so far. But look, he's got the rest of the year, and he's got all of next season that he's signed through to prove that he is a quality starting pitcher at the major league level again, and he certainly got an opportunity to do this because he's looked great. And Marcus Semien, who was a teammate with Sean Manaea back when they both played for the Oakland Athletics, said this after the game. He said, quote, Sean Manaea is looking more like the guy he saw when they were teammates in Oakland. And if you look at Sean Manaea's career numbers, guys, it's plain to see that some of his best seasons before that 2024 campaign were for the Oakland A's. They absolutely were. He threw a no-hitter there. There was actually a really interesting interview with Chris Sale brought up by Steve Gelbs during that Mets-Braves series where Chris Sale was essentially flattered but also surprised that Manaea had ever started emulating his arm angle because Sean Manaea outdueled Chris Sale when Sale was on the Red Sox back in 2018. When Sean Manaea threw his no-hitter and he had another great season in 21. He's had a lot of success. He's been very up and down, as you can see. He's had good years followed by bad years, but he's certainly proven that he can be a very effective guy. And now he's got his chance because the Mets, like they had lost confidence in Manaea going into the season, they've now lost confidence, at least for a starting position, for David Peterson. David Peterson is the biggest loser out of all of this. And look, we all want David Peterson to succeed, but he's got to get a lot of outs. He's got to start putting up zeros out of the bullpen. He could potentially be a huge weapon for the Mets out of the bullpen. And also, he himself could have a path back into the rotation because remember, the Mets rotation as it currently stands with Christian Scott and Clay Holmes not in the starting five due to injury, it's Freddie Peralta, Nolan McLean, Sean Manaea, and I mean, what else are we really looking at here? I mean, Kodai Senga, it's tough to rely on him. It's really, we don't know what we're going to get. We think that he has talent, but he hasn't shown it in quite a while. So David Peterson is going to have an opportunity where if he pitches well out of the bullpen, maybe him and Manaea can both be in the rotation at the same time. But certainly Peterson's got his work cut out for him. His numbers on the season are absolutely terrible. There's a reason why he was demoted to the bullpen. And unlike Manaea, who's picked it up despite the macro levels not looking good, David Peterson has not pitched well, and these are actually Manaea's numbers. David Peterson, though, has not pitched well in his last 30 games. It's really fallen in line with where his season stats are, and if you look at his Savant page, David Peterson, he's given up a lot of hard hit contact. That's been the biggest thing for him. It's not that he's not striking guys out because that's not the kind of pitcher he is, but when you're giving up hard hit contact, you're not going to get a lot of outs unless you get extremely lucky. And, certain metrics are kinder to David Peterson. I mentioned that on my video yesterday. And I do think that perhaps he's getting a little bit unlucky, but ultimately he's not getting unlucky to the point where he should have a 3 ERA. This has certainly been the worst we've seen David Peterson in quite some time. I hope he is 100% healthy. And if so, I hope he can correct it because, he is a possible trade candidate and also a guy that, depending on where this Mets season goes, could still end up solidifying himself as a difference maker. But, that's something that he's going to have to prove the rest of the season. And Sean Manaea, he's taken 2 big steps in the past 2 weeks, including one yesterday, in proving that he will be a key contributor for the Mets going forward, and with him signed through next year to a $25 million AAV, that is exactly what the Mets asked for, and given the initial prognostications for Sean Manaea and what the overall expectations were, what Manaea's done is even better than what we could have expected. So let me know what you guys think of Sean Manaea, his role going forward, how you see it playing out, how you see his new, mechanics and his new adaptations that he's made and how sustainable those will be, and if he is back to being one of the better left-handed starting pitchers in the game. Comment below, let me know, and as always, let's go Mets.